I really hope you've been enjoying our Get Into the Property Groove for 2017 campaign so far. And joining me now is David Smith, who is a partner at Anthony Gold Law and also Policy Director of the RLA. And David, Happy New Year to you.
And to you, thank you.
I thought it would be good to talk to you because actually 2016 was an annus horribilis for landlords. And now as we're into 2017, can landlords expect a hammering this year as well?
I think there's a real risk of more of the same. It's quite clear that the Conservative government considers that what are now called jams, or just about managings, are predominantly to be found in the rental sector, and therefore I think we can expect rental regulation to continue its current course. Indeed, there is regulation to come into force through 2017 anyway. I wouldn't entirely rule out a full-scale licensing drive against all landlords in England. I think it still remains possible. The tax changes obviously still haven't really kicked in. They will come into force, and there's certainly an aspect in which the Treasury has made fairly clear now that it sees landlords as an easy target who no one has a great deal of sympathy for and who have got some spare cash. They've made a fair bit of money out of the stamp duty land tax changes, and I suspect they're hoping to make a bit more money out of Section 24, and it's one of the big problems with getting it reversed. It's not the issue anymore of fairness, it's just simply a straight issue of they want cash, they believe we've got it, and it's very hard to get cash off the Treasury as a rule.
Now, where are the RLA at with the lobbying against Section 24? Because it's, the coalition has been announced by the Tenant tax campaign. What's happening behind the scenes?
It's a tough one. Obviously, the coalition involves different people with different ideas. It's also a bit of a tough time because obviously things didn't work out in the High Court and the judicial review. The government is, as I've already said, making pretty clear they want the money. So we've got to try and balance it between continuing to push them to reverse this, but also trying to have a backstop position where they give back in some other way. I think if I was realistic, while I would love the government to reverse this, I think it's a tough call at the moment, but that can change. Chancellors have changed before. The new Chancellor is taking a different view about things. I think our best hope would be to get a limitation so it only applies to new properties or new borrowing in some way, or possibly to get give-backs on other suitable areas. And we've pushed both in the RLA, as well as simultaneously pushing for this whole thing to be reversed. But it's not easy by any means, I'm afraid. And it's tough from landlords' perspective because, of course, they don't see anything happening. Many of the meetings we're not allowed to talk about. We wouldn't get them if we were talking about them. Some of them we are allowed to talk about, and those ones that we do tweet and tell people we've had. The key thing remains, though, that a great many MPs are not aware of this. Not all MPs agree. I've had a meeting recently with a Merseyside MP who is not happy about this.
That's good to know.
There's a great move from a lot of MPs who are not London-based, who take the view this is a London tax that does nothing for them, and people must, I'm looking at the camera deliberately, people must contact their MP.
Yes.
And keep pushing their MP. You can find ways to do that on all of the coalition partners with tenant tax. You must not just write to your MP, but go and meet with your MP and tell them what the problem is and why it is a problem. The more people that do that, the more power there is. Every time someone has had a meeting with their MP, there has been a contact off the back of it, and mostly meetings with us as well, which is hugely important. MPs are far more swayed at the end of the day by people who actually vote for them, turning up and saying, I vote for you, this is my problem, or I didn't vote for you, but I might if you sort this out, than they are ever going to be by a million lobbyists like myself sitting in their back offices saying this is a problem. Tenants approach MPs to complain about problems with properties, and so that's the MP's experience. Newspapers don't write stories about lovely landlord and tenant relationships. They mostly write stories about horrible landlords doing horrible things. They're better stories. Why would they not write them? But MPs read the newspapers as well. So if an MP's entirety of experience is based on stories they've read in the press that say landlords are horrible, and a group of tenants who have come and complained about individual properties and asked for help, then they don't have a very strong view of landlords. If landlords go to them and make clear that they are perfectly reasonable people, perfectly nice people, but with real-world problems as well, then that will help to change MP's perspective. the reality is, and people don't really accept this, but it's true, I'm afraid, politics isn't really made by carefully calculated decisions based on statistical evidence. It's made by people who feel stuff, and it's made largely on about how they feel at a particular time. And that will only really change if people get in there and go and see their MPs and explain it to them.
Indeed, and we'll put a link to Andy Walker's post below this, because Andy recently went and saw his MP, and he has reported back on his experience and given some advice on how to do that. So we'll pop a link to that post below here. And David, I think the other thing that I think may come under scrutiny, or seems to be more on certainly local authority agendas, is HMOs.
Yeah, inevitably they're going to come under more and more pressure. HMOs are a bit of a catch-22. We need HMOs if we're to house people, but generally speaking, HMOs are being used to house the most vulnerable people. Some HMOs are of a very poor standard, some of them are very good. But where HMOs are of a very poor standard, again, it tends to be newsworthy, and of course it tends to affect more people. Again, the HMO licensing changes are going to come in April, and more HMOs are likely to be licensed. From the back of that, we're likely to see an increase in prosecutions. We'll also have, of course, the new penalty notices coming into force. And for local authorities, that's direct money in their pockets, which they badly need. And I would expect that they will be using those penalty notices to fill their coffers, as they say.
So just to finish, David, landlords, they're going to have to stay informed even more than ever before in 2017, because in the eyes of the law, ignorance isn't an excuse, is it?
No, most of the offences that we're talking about, regulatory offences, are what we call strict liability offences. If the situation is true, it really doesn't matter whether you meant it or not. So it's not like murder or something like that. If your property needs an HMO licence and you don't have one, we don't really care whether you meant it or whether you were ignorant or not. We just care that you didn't have it, and that's the end of the discussion, really. So it's important people bear in mind that they need to be organised and structured and have good processes in place. If they don't, they're at high risk of being caught out.
Well, what would you say are the positive things looking forward then? Because it's always nice to finish on a positive note, isn't it?
Well, the reality is, despite everything that's happened, the property market remains buoyant, the rental market remains buoyant, rents remain strong, and I don't see that changing. People who want to stay in this market and who are prepared to take the time and energy to invest in it sensibly will still see good rates of return. There's no reason why they shouldn't, and I don't think that will change. Indeed, if the government thought it would change, they wouldn't be doing this, because they don't want the property market damaged any more than anybody else. So I think the property market remains strong, and there's no reason why it shouldn't continue to do so.